Can't believe this. It's a yarn that's hit the UK Telegraph just in the last 24 hours. 2 years after Climategate, where a number of emails were leaked to the media which showed leading climate scientists had bullied dissenters, as well as distorting and hiding facts, a further batch of emails have been leaked. And like last time, they show scientists at the heart of the man-made global warming industry in a most unflattering light. Now this time it involves scientists including Michael Mann, Phil Jones, Ben Santa, Tom Wigley, Kevin Trenbeth and Keith Briffa. Now the UK Telegraph says it has a series of email exchanges between these people, deliberately exaggerating the extent of anthropogenic global warming, while privately admitting to one another that the evidence is nowhere near as strong as they'd like it to be. In other words, let's exaggerate because the cold hard facts just don't stack up. So this isn't science, this is some kind of social, political, green campaign. And the telly has printed some of the highlights from around 220,000 emails circulated within this group. They include the following. There's an email from a scientist concerned that facts were being distorted in a report. Quote, observations do not show rising temperatures throughout the tropical troposphere unless you accept one single study and approach and discount a wealth of others. This is just downright dangerous. We need to communicate the uncertainty and be honest. Phil, hopefully we can find time to discuss these further if necessary, unquote. Then there's this comment from another scientist, quote, I also think the science is being manipulated to put a political spin on it, which for all our sakes might not be too clever in the long run, unquote. You mean it could leak out? Well, it has. And this from a leading climate scientist concerned about the spin being profited by the IPCC, quote, it seems that a few people have a very strong say, and no matter how much talking goes on beforehand, the big decisions are made at the 11th hour by a select core group, unquote. Another scientist emailed this, quote, Mike, the figure you sent is very deceptive. There have been a number of dishonest presentations of model results by individual authors and by the IPCC, unquote. Then another scientist is proposing tricks to sell the climate change mantra, quote, the trick may be to decide on the main message and use that to guide what's included and what is left out, unquote. All this from yet another scientist, quote, I can't overstate the huge amount of political interest in the project as a message that the government can give on climate change to help them tell their story. They want the story to be a very strong one and don't want to be made to look foolish, unquote. There was this regarding how to help the CSIRO, quote, we support the idea of looking at the implications of climate change for what he termed global icons. One of these suggested icons was the Great Barrier Reef. It also became apparent that there was always a local reason for the destruction, cyclones, starfish, fertilisers. Such a project to promote long-term climate change could do a lot to raise awareness of threats to the reef, unquote. And how's this? This is a doozy. I agree with Nick that climate change might be a better labelling than global warming, unquote. So the bottom line is, and there are 250-odd emails here, scientists know this is a political con, and it's driving a wedge between climate researchers as well. What's emerging is that some scientists genuinely just want the facts to be told, while there's this powerful inner circle trying to spin the truth for their own green political reasons. And this comes on the back, of course, as we've discussed on the program only this week, of the latest IPCC report being leaked to the BBC last week. Despite the report using a hell of a lot of non-scientific, meaningless mumbo-jumbo, terms like low confidence of natural disasters increasing, it did at least establish something very critical. The facts are not necessarily supporting the models. This IPCC report is full of escape clauses, and it's a reason why Durban is doomed to failure next week. And we spoke to Professor Ian Plimer about this last Monday. Greg Combay and his 40 bureaucrats are about to waste yet more taxpayers' money to try and justify a meaningless carbon dioxide tax that's about to strangle the Australian economy. And strangle it will. Because this is my final bit of revelation to you. From a UBS report, it has just looked at the situation in Europe, saying the carbon price will collapse and 210 billion euros will have been wasted by hapless consumers forced to pay the carbon tax. 210 billion euros of waste. Since June, the cost of carbon credits have slumped 40%. More, there's such an oversupply of credits, there's enough to satisfy Europe until 2025. Everyone got onto the rort and the bubble has burst, leaving consumers out of pocket and no difference in emissions. This is what the report has found, the UBS report. You look it up. It's as rich as it gets. Shadow Federal Environment Minister Greg Hunt joins me on the line right now. Greg, good afternoon.
G'day.
I guess we should concentrate on this first before we ask you a few other questions that would be relevant to what's occurring in Parliament House over the last 24 hours. But Durban next week, is it even worth us attending based on what we've heard overnight?
Well, I don't think it's worth sending a massive delegation which would represent the entire front half of the plane. I think it's right for Australia to be there, but in small, modest numbers, because any outcome from Durban will be small and modest. It's absolutely clear that a global treaty is not on the table, that countries such as Canada, the United States, Japan and Russia have made it clear they're not even going to support a new Kyoto agreement. So let's be careful with taxpayers' money, because they haven't been too careful with taxpayers' money over the last few years.
Yeah, how about sending 5 to Durban instead of 45? Can I just ask one point at a time? The IPCC report, which was supposed to surface in Durban, but was leaked by and to the BBC, a stack of escape clauses everywhere. In short, the scientific data is not supporting the climate model predictions. This is Y2K bug all over again.
Yeah, well, the best that I have seen on it, and I'll try to be balanced, not political on this, is that they are saying they believe that CO2 is causing climate change, they believe it's causing temperature rises, but there's uncertainty about all of the other incidences which are associated with it.
Low confidence. In other words, we want to be confident, but it doesn't exist.
Yeah, so it's put out a realism towards a lot of the things which many people are attributing to climate change. So the basis is they say, yes, there's an impact, yes, it's caused by human activities, and yes, it's likely to lead to temperature change, but much greater uncertainty about all of the different weather events which were being attributed widely. The central scientific body has, shall we say, put in a lot more caution on that front than had been the case.
Okay, to leak number 2, and these embarrassing emails, even IPCC scientists are now at war. Divisions between those wanting to present the full factual evidence and a hardcore inner circle, so they explain in emails, wanting to push ideology. This is Climategate Mark II, isn't it?
Nobody should distort the science in either direction. And if anybody is providing evidence that there has been distortion in either direction, that should be investigated by an independent body. It should simply, flatly, absolutely be investigated by an independent body if there's distortion of the science in either direction for political reasons.
Okay, revelation number 3, a new UBS report. It says the European experience has just made people hundreds of billions of dollars poorer while emissions have not changed. Gee, it would have been handy to know about this report about 3 weeks ago.
This is absolutely devastating for the government. What this UBS report says, and UBS, for your listeners, is a Swiss-based bank, it says that the European carbon tax is going to cost consumers 210 billion euros, about $287 billion Australian, for almost zero impact. So in other words, this European emissions trading scheme, which is their carbon tax equivalent, is going to cost $287 billion for almost zero impact And then the report gets stronger. It says there will be limited benefits, embarrassing consequences, billions of euros in windfall profits, fraud, fading political support. So in other words, the European carbon tax, which isn't as expensive and isn't as broad as the Australian carbon tax, is a complete failure. But the Australian carbon tax is the worst possible design, and it is massively more expensive on a per capita basis, on a per head of population basis than the European one. So it's the heaviest and broadest carbon tax in the world, and it's being modelled on a system which is clearly failing in Europe.
Well, $23 a tonne price, when Europe might be lucky to have a carbon credit price of $1 or $2 by the time this comes on tap. We are in for it.
What this means is we will simply send jobs and emissions and investment straight to China or to India or to Indonesia. So a huge impact on investment in Australia. We've already seen it in terms of an example from Coogee Chemicals that wanted to build a methanol plant in Australia. For every 1 tonne of emissions that would have occurred here, because they use gas to make methanol in Australia, 4 tonnes would be emitted in China. So in other words, the environment would be cleaner by doing this in Australia, but because of the carbon tax, the investment will occur in China. The jobs and investment won't occur in Australia.
No matter what happens, will the coalition repeal the legislation if it gets into government?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely, categorically.
All right, a couple of quick things. You were up to 3 last night, no doubt, 3 this morning with the mining tax.
We were.
And all the secret deals done with both Wilkie and Adam Bant, etc., which we've had some explanation of today. Did Tony Abbott fall to sleep?
No, I was two places away from him, and we were chatting away.
Well, where's that rubbish coming from?
Well, I was 2 seats away from him. We were chatting away. We were talking about the suspension which we launched at 9 o'clock this morning, and I was engaging with him right throughout the latter part of the votes, which went on for a couple of hours.
Right, okay. Now, we know that to get the deal over the line, they've had to back off on one of their, well-trumpeted Wayne Swan banking reforms. This is not very good for those who have a mortgage.
Well, I am worried about the consequences of the extra $100 million in tax they're going to take, but right at the heart of this was a secret commission, effectively, of $100 million for political purposes. The Greens got a payoff in political terms, not to them personally, but a political payoff of $100 million for their vote. This is one of the great abuses of parliamentary process in the last 20 years in Australia. $100 million, a secret deal, which has only just come to light now because we have pushed and pushed and pushed, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with the mining tax or the reforms. It was literally a $100 million secret deal to get a vote, and is a complete disgrace, and of and in itself should be enough to bring down a government.
Whatever it takes. All right. Greg Hunt, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Shadow Environment Minister Greg Hunt. Now, I apologise for having to go through the vast amount of detail associated with all these leaks and reports that have come out in the past 24 to 48 hours based on cap and trade schemes and carbon taxes. But this is so important because we're now finding the truth and not the con.